Welcome back to our Peace Through Strength podcast, brought to you by the American Security Council Foundation. I am your host, Joy Votrobek, back with our senior analyst, Laurence Sanford.
Nice to be here.
Welcome back, Larry.
Welcome.
And today we are going to discuss Larry's article on Venezuela's vote to annex Guyana's Esequiba region, if I said that correctly.
Close enough.
Okay. You can find all of Larry's articles on our website at www.ascf.us. Please subscribe to our newsletter and consider donating so you can help change American policy. Larry, in your paper on December 3rd, you said there was a referendum in Venezuela was voted on for the annexation of Guyana's Esequiba region. I'm still going to struggle with that one. Noah, can you show us a map of that region? Thank you. So, Larry, can you give us a little brief on why your opinion, why Venezuela thinks they can annex Guyana's Esequiba region without starting a war?
Well, we have to go back in history like in so many other things, and the history is based on Maduro, who's the president of Venezuela, who was a Marxist, anti-American autocrat, has grievances because that's the only way Marxists survive. They complain about grievances, oppressed versus oppressor. And historically, this region of Guyana was part of Venezuela when Venezuela was part of the Spanish Empire. But with the freedom of Venezuela from the Spanish Empire, the British colony of British Guyana laid claim to that territory and basically has been in it since the 1895 when it was officially arbitrated in Paris, awarded to Guyana. Now, Guyana is a little nation of 1 million people, less than 1 million people, half of whom come from the country of India, 40% of descendants of African slaves. So, and it's the only country in South America that speaks English because it was a British colony, British Guyana. And they received independence back in the 1960s, 70s. And this Venezuelan claim has lied dormant because Venezuela has nothing but civil strife, revolutions, changes of government, and things have come and gone. And they also happen to be sitting upon the world's largest proven reserve of oil. And so they really saw no need to expand their territories. But now, when 25% of the Venezuelan population has fled from Venezuela, from this dystopian Marxist socialist government where there's no food, medicine, no security, and no security from crime, that is, but there's plenty of security thanks to the Chinese and Russian intelligence services equipping the Venezuelan military and police with all sorts of sophisticated gear. For example, in Venezuela, they're all issued an ID card, sort of like, just like in China. And
I am going to get to that.
Oh.
And but so, you're saying Venezuela is now disputing the international agreements.
From 1895, and they're doing it now because the dystopian nightmare of Venezuela is an excuse for Maduro to rally the troops. And yeah, there's millions of barrels of oil out there off the coast of Guyana. And even better, the discoveries were sort of spearheaded by an American company called Exxon. Though they have partnerships with a Chinese oil company to help in the funding. They do a lot of these joint ventures like this all over the world where American oil companies, Chinese oil companies, they get together to explore off Africa, for example.
Right, and Russia, I believe, too.
Yeah, that's right. So, but the big guy in the oil thing is Exxon, and all of a sudden they have all this oil discovered. So it's really changing the social fabric of Guyana, and they're going to have a problem figuring out what they're going to do with all the money. And it's getting blowback because now you have a Exxon hospital, Exxon highway. And so some of the natives are saying, you know, we don't want them to have as much influence in here as they are with all this money. So
Guyana's not too sure about Exxon's footprint there as well.
Some segment of it. But I mean, let's face it, more money is better than no money. So they're working on it. But the guy Maduro he's just a communist, and he went to China and became one of China's best friends, and 2 or 3 months later, now he's preaching war, sort of like what happened with Putin when he invaded Ukraine. He had gone to China a couple of months prior to that to become best friends with China. So the drumbeats of war of Maduro coinciding with the Ukraine war, coinciding with what's going on in the Middle East, coinciding what's going on in the Taiwan Straits. There's a lot of places with potential, real potential difficulties, and Americans getting stretched thin, because just recently Maduro said he's going to come in anyways, regardless of what anyone says.
Yes,
and he told Exxon to stop drilling, and Exxon basically told him to, no, we're going to continue. And now the U.S. military is working with the Guianan forces. Well, they have like 4,000 people in the military. Venezuela has 30 million people. So, you know, the numbers aren't there, and I can't imagine the United States wants to get involved in a jungle warfare thing. And this whole region in Guyana that we're talking about, the Esequiba, is basically jungle inhabited by indigenous people, maybe 100,000. So it's just one vast swamp jungle.
So Guyana doesn't have the power to withstand Venezuela at all, and the U.S. likely is not going to want to get involved.
Yeah, well, they are, though. That's what's scary.
As far as a war would
well,
be
yeah,
concerned.
yeah. In Brazil, socialist buddy Lula, who's the president of Brazil, he doesn't want to have this happening either. And on the map, you'll see that south of Guyana is Brazil. So do they want to have a war going on in their border either? So it gets complicated.
Well, you also said, and I thought it was a good point, is that he's distracting the population from their misery. As you said, thousands were leaving because of the impoverished state they're living in, and there really is no reason, as you also say, the combined years of socialist rule have impoverished once prosperous Venezuela, even though it has the largest oil reserves in the world.
It
Do you
takes
think
a
this
socialist.
Is political corruption?
No, it's political corruption. Obviously, in socialists, only it's a different kind of we have our lobbyists and we have money under the table, but they have corruption from a political power viewpoint. And of course, they do have the Swiss bank accounts. They're all corrupt. And you know, just to give a perspective, over 7 million Venezuelans have fled the country. It takes a lot of guts, in my opinion, to flee your homeland. Well, 7 million people out of Venezuela, that's like 70 million Americans leaving the United States. It's a lot of people. And they have to be pretty hardy and industrial. And over the years, the 7 million have fled, mostly to South American countries. So they're all over, they're scattered all over South America. But now with the open border here in the U.S., they're flocking to America.
Yes,
and
I
the
heard
last
that.
year, 500,000, 1 million, who knows how many are here.
I guess the question comes to mind too, and we're going to get into this with China, but that's a lot of people leaving. Why not stand and fight, or is there no capability to fight against the government that's in there now? You
know, that's an excellent point, because in a way, from our own national interest, we'd be better off if those 7 million were there, mad as hell at the regime, and maybe doing something about it. And so Maduro has sort of let them, a lot of them have gone to next door neighbor, Colombia. Maduro says, get out of here because we don't want you festering a social revolution. And I don't know what you do. My feeling is one of the great failings of American policy, and certainly the last 20 or 30 years, is what I call the gray zone activities. I don't believe in war. I don't believe in shooting people. I don't believe in missiles and shooting missiles and all that stuff. But one thing we've done a terrible job of, and the Chinese and the Russians do a very good job on, is what is called gray zone activities. Those are activities, the low shooting, in other words, no actual shooting, but above State Department tea parties. And so, for example, China has their Coast Guard shooting water cannons at Philippine fishing boats. The Chinese have poisoned American universities with monies. They've poisoned Congress with monies. They've poisoned businesses, Wall Street in particular, with enticing them with the promises and in some cases the actual rewards of billions of dollars in profits. So they're very good at gray zone activities.
And that's one of your action plans, which I'm going to get to with the Peace Through Strain solution. But before we get there, can you speak to China, or the CCP, I will say, the Chinese Communist Party, influence in Venezuela?
Well, they're obviously best of friends because China has lent Venezuela $60 billion based on oil sales. So right now, Venezuela is the #4 source of oil for China. But as mentioned earlier, they're sitting on top of the largest proven reserves of oil in the world, even more than Saudi Arabia. It's just that the socialist paradise can't produce. They started nationalizing all the oil industries, and all the engineers and all the people that know what the heck they're doing fled the country. So production keeps on dropping. The U.S. has sanctions in place, which I think is affecting some of the oil. But the main reason is the socialist government just can't run anything. Socialists don't know how to run anything.
And you make some points here to what I was talking about. Instead of the people standing and fighting, they're suppressed, and a lot of this technology is coming from the CCP party.
Yes.
National digital ID cards, you have fingerprint authentication and facial recognition cameras.
All in China, and now in Venezuela, and actually there's some talk of a national ID here in America, but I think there's going to be a lot of resistance to that. Well, in a way, we have a national ID with the Social Security, but I think it's a little different. They have social credit, so the ID cards are all computerized, and so if you write a paper that the government doesn't like, it's noted on your ID card. If you get arrested, it's noted on your ID card. Social Security isn't quite there yet, so.
I hope Big Brother here isn't noting our ID cards with these articles. Well, getting to Peace Through Strain solutions, so in your action plans, and you already spoke to the gray zone activity, but I also thought was interesting, you said working with international organizations such as the Organization of American States, OAS. Can you kind of give us an overview of OAS and how we work with them on a more unified message?
Well, they have annual meetings. They just had one last year, and it was not all that well attended because Biden didn't invite Nicaragua and Cuba and Bolivia. My feeling is invite them all. And you're not going to get any unified statement, but you should meet with them. I don't have any problem meeting with, just like I believe in the United Nations, except we shouldn't be funding part of the UN that's diametrically opposed to our policy. So, for example, we send hundreds of millions of dollars to that refugee plan that goes into Gaza and the Palestinian Liberation Organization. No, that's not in national interest of the United States, and so we should work better at it. The Chinese have done a marvelous job at the UN in influencing their policies, and we should work hard with these international organizations and stop playing the nice guy and start carrying a big stick around so that...
Good, I'm glad you said that because I was going to get to that one as well.
Yeah.
And we talked about the gray zone, and we've also talked in the past about removing sanctions against Cuba, and you're saying as Venezuela as well, because they're just not working.
Yeah. Well, there's an argument that some sanctions work. You hear about it in Iran all the time. In the long run, it doesn't work. I mean, we've had sanctions in Cuba for 60 years. How's that working out? I don't see Cuba going down the tubes. All it does is make us look bad, and it distorts the world economy markets. There's other ways of going after them, and the biggest way to go after them is you have to have a policy. If you don't have a game plan, you sort of wander around aimlessly, and we should have a game plan that says the Iranian government is a dictatorship theocracy that's against our national interests, and we're going to do everything we can to take them down. And we should say the same thing to Venezuela. We should say that to China. The CCP is a totalitarian nightmare, and why we want to be friends with them is beyond me. I'm not saying war. I'm not saying anything about sanctions or any of that stuff, but we should take actions to protect American interests. That's
certainly not to continue giving them money.
Precisely, yeah. And I don't know how much money we give Venezuela, but China has a, what, $300 or $400 billion a year trade surplus with America. We should do something about that.
Well, I know at one time, I think we got about 30% of our oil from Venezuela. So I don't know what the number is now, and I don't know how much.
I don't think that we're getting any.
I don't at all.
Yeah, and their oil is not what they call sweet. Sweet oil apparently is light oil that is easy to process through refineries. Venezuelan oil is what they call heavy or whatever. but it requires special refineries and techniques to process. So it's not something that is as fungible as, say, Saudi oil, American
Canadian, Mexican are our big oil
deposits, right?
Now, yeah. And then finally, talking about the big stick, invest in the American military. Without a big stick, speaking softly has no significance. I would agree, and some may accuse the U.S. of carrying a big stick, but as you mentioned, speaking softly has no significance. Most of these countries you have referred to only respect and understand a big stick.
Right.
So would you say that when administrations don't show strength through consequences for their actions, such as Russia annexing Crimea, and now you see they've gone on to attack sovereign Ukraine,
Yep.
We're continuing to embolden these countries like Venezuela to annex.
It's Korea, Vietnam, all deja vu. I mean, we're not giving them the tools for the Ukraine to win the war. I just read an article recently where there's a certain kind of missile that has a range of a couple hundred miles that could take out the Russian rail line into Crimea and devastate some of their infrastructure so that they couldn't continue with the war as easily as they're doing. And we're not doing that. So it's a sort of a piecemeal, incremental, and I was there in Vietnam type thing. And it was all incremental. It was only near the end that we started to bomb Haiphong Harbor, and the government controlled all the military actions. And instead of taking out every ship in Haiphong Harbor right at the beginning, we just tried to escalate gradually. And as a result, they adjusted gradually, and it never ends. In the Ukraine, I can make a case that we should just declare it over. No more aggression. Just stop where we are. The provinces that the Russians control are all Russian-speaking, majority Russian-speaking. Do we want to keep on going, spending money? The only way to do it is to take down Russia if you want to win the war, and I don't see them taking down Russia.
I was going to say, it doesn't necessarily mean that Russia's going to stop, but we don't know.
Yeah, I know. But we can bulk up their defenses, and we can start giving Ukraine some weapons that will really hurt the Russians. I just don't see them giving up anything. So now we have another North Korea, South Korea, World War I kind of thing, and the only way to do it is to have a massive influx of American power to take down Russia, and I don't see that happening. So I say, let's declare a stalemate, develop a border and defenses so the Russians can't encroach anymore, and see ya.
So peace through strength. We need to have peace, but we need to have a strong administration that's going to stick to a hard line.
Yeah. Peace through strength, that's the motto of American security council.
I think we're going to continue to see these countries trying to annex lands, particularly Taiwan situation, and also the last podcast I was doing on Turkey and Northern Cyprus.
Yeah, there's another potential flashpoint too with the Greeks. And the Americans' military, we're only spending 3% of our gross national product. Back in the day, 5, 6, 7% of our national product was on defense spending. As a result, we've hollowed out our military infrastructure. So, for example, we don't have enough shipyards to maintain our ships properly or repair our ships. We don't have enough building yards to build the ships. Ammunition for the Ukraine, we're running out of ammunition for the Ukraine. Western Europe is bare also in their cupboard as far as military equipment. So we have to spend a lot of money to rebuild the industrial might of America in military. Because there's some bad guys out there. They're all out after us. Iran, Russia, China, now Venezuela.
And as
the
we've
Houthis.
discussed, the Houthis. As we've discussed on prior podcasts, I think there are ways to do that too. That we work smarter.
Yeah,
with the drones and other.
I know, and we're spending a lot of money wastefully. But that's again, government it runs the military, and so there's going to be waste. Get over it. Let's make sure we have the right equipment at the right place at the right time. Yeah, that's right too. We got the Houthi problem now. They're declaring war on Israel, so we got the whole bloody mess.
And that article will be out soon.
Yes.
So thank you, Larry, for this brief.
Thank you, Joy.
And to our listeners, you can view all of Larry's articles at www.ascf.us. Join our newsletter there and consider donating. You can also join Larry on Substack under American Security Council Foundation, and as well as our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages, YouTube, and Rumble under American Security Council Foundation. Thank you, Larry. Thank you,
Thank you.
listeners. And join us again next time on our Peace Through Strength podcast. Thank you to Brightline.